Hello everyone. This is Michelle Hodges, the Dyslexia and Literacy Intervention Specialist for the Arizona Department of Education. Thank you so much for joining us for this assessment video series, where we will showcase the universal screeners and vendors who have been approved to meet the needs of the Move On When Reading and Dyslexia legislation for the 2020-2021 school year. Although this video series does not replace the extensive training provided by each individual vendor, this series is a brief overview of each approved screener and may also be used to assist schools and school districts in making a universal screener selection. It was well put by the International Dyslexia Association. Screening measures, by definition, are typically brief assessments of skills or abilities that are highly predictive of a later outcome. Screening measures are designed to quickly differentiate students into two groups, those who require interventions and those who do not. A screening measure needs to focus on specific skills that are highly correlated with broader measures of reading achievement, resulting in a highly accurate sorting of students. The following Move On When Reading and Dyslexia legislative requirements can be found in A.R.S. 15704. Each child who enters kindergarten through 3rd grade will be given a universal literacy screener within 45 days of entry, as well as screened during winter and spring benchmark periods. This benchmark data will be submitted to the Move On When Reading team by October 1st, February 1st, and June 1st, which follows the normal Move On When Reading requirements. Each approved vendor has been through a rigorous vetting process by the Arizona Department of Education's Request for Information procedures. Each vendor provided extensive and technical information to ensure their product met the following requirements. The submeasures shown here are broken down by grade level. You will hear directly from the vendors how their assessment tool measures each of these indicators. Universal screening tools should be administered by individuals who have taken the minimum training deemed appropriate by the vendor. All assessors should also follow the vendor's specific guidelines and recommendations for valid implementation. It takes deliberate and additional training to accurately interpret and analyze screening data. It is important to remember that screening alone does not diagnose dyslexia. Richard Selznick best reminds us, dyslexia screening is a tool for identifying children who are at risk for this learning disorder. This means that screening does not diagnose dyslexia. Rather, it identifies predictor variables that raise red flags so parents and teachers can intervene early and effectively. Universal screening of all students is an important first step. Now I will turn it over to one of Arizona's approved vendors.
Hi, this is Alan Stadenauer from Amplify. Thank you so much for joining me on this brief tour of mCLASS with DIBELS 8th edition. mCLASS is an all-in-one tool. It serves as both a literacy and a dyslexia screener, and in addition, it provides diagnostic data for all students, including those who are struggling and even those who are at and well above benchmark. mCLASS will then take that data and create instant groupings and offer you lessons that you could use with all students. mCLASS is the digital edition of the University of Oregon's DIBELS 8th edition, which is based on the most up-to-date research in both reading instruction as well as reading assessment. The assessment content is the same in both editions, though in mCLASS you have digital administration, digital scoring, and a very broad suite of instant reports. The research studies for DIBELS 8th edition were conducted across 2 years with a very large sample of students that were representative of the entire United States. The assessment has been shown to be extremely reliable, and the validation work was done against DIBELS Next, against the ITBS, as well as against dyslexia screening assessments. The full technical data can be found in the technical manual on the University of Oregon's website. Let's take a look at the submeasures that are included in mCLASS. Let's take a look at this crosswalk. As you can see, mCLASS covers all of the required screener submeasures as a literacy and dyslexia screener. At K, adding on oral reading fluency at 1, and then oral reading fluency and reading comprehension at grades 2 and 3. At the heart of mCLASS is DIBELS 8th edition. This newest version of DIBELS was based on all of the most up-to-date research about reading instruction as well as reading assessment. In addition, it was validated specifically for use in dyslexia screening. Each measure is about 1 minute long and is given consistently at all 3 times of year, fall, winter, and spring, of the grade in which you see the check marks. So for example, when you see phonemic segmentation fluency at grade kindergarten, that is fall, winter, spring. And then again at grade 1, fall, winter, spring. There are a number of time savings measures that go into this. The students who are most struggling, for example, on phonemic segmentation in kindergarten, perhaps scoring a 0, won't be asked to do a more advanced measure like word reading fluency. In the older grades, it works the reverse. If a student is reading well above benchmark on their oral reading fluency, they won't be asked to do more basic skills like the nonsense word fluency. Now let's take a look at each of the different measures of DIBELS, and we'll also talk about RAN, and then we'll pull it all back together against the requirements. The first DIBELS measure is letter naming fluency. This is given in kindergarten and first grade at all 3 times of year in each of the grades. Students are asked to look at a page of letters and name as many as they can name correctly in 60 seconds. If you're familiar at all with prior version of DIBELS, what's new in DIBELS 8 is the fact that the letter frequency on the page also mimics how frequently they appear in written English. DIBELS 8 phonemic segmentation fluency is used to meet the requirements of phonological and phonemic awareness. This is administered in both kindergarten and first grade, all 3 times a year, and is also available for progress monitoring. Like other DIBELS measures, it's a 1-minute measure. The teacher is going to say a word to the child, and the student is going to break it up into phonemes. Teachers are going to be able to indicate all the correct phonemes that are done, or by dragging a finger across the screen is going to be able to indicate when a child blends phonemes together. So for example, it can also be used to understand and then reveal diagnostic data if a child is doing onset rhyme instead of breaking up every single phoneme. DIBELS 8th edition offers a broader set of skills progressions than the prior versions. So the items in each form are going to increase in difficulty. In kindergarten, we'll always start with 2 phoneme words, and then the remainder of the form is going to be 3 phoneme words. In first grade, we again start with the 2 phoneme words so struggling readers can show what they know, but then slowly but surely over the course of that form and over the course of the year, increased words with more phonemes. Nonsense word fluency fulfills multiple requirements. The task is given in kindergarten to 3rd grade and is also available for progress monitoring. In this task, a student reads non-words for 1 minute. In each of these cases, they're reading from a printed piece of paper, and it can be multi-syllable words. They can sound out the words letter by letter and then recode it, or just say the whole word. The result of this is that it fulfills the requirements of both correspondence between sounds and letters, sound symbol recognition, and also the requirement for nonsense word fluency for phonics. As we can see from the picture on the right, this student had the word rab and said it rab, meaning started sounding out and then blended the whole word. In DIBELS 8th edition, unlike prior versions, the child is going to get 3 points for letter sounds as well as a point for decoding. Each NWF administration yields 2 different scores. One is NWF correct letter sounds, and then the other one is NWF words recoded correctly. The result of that is the fact that the same 1 minute measure is able to cultivate data for both required measures. As we've said, One of the big advantages or the big innovations of DIBELS 8th edition is that it has a much broader skills progression. We see this very strongly in the nonsense word fluency, especially as it moves from grade to grade. In prior versions of DIBELS, NWF was focused in CVC words. In DIBELS 8th edition, every form in every grade will always begin with CVC words. Of course, that's the key thing that you need at the earlier grades, but then even in the older grades, struggling readers will want to show what they know. At the same time, the grade 1 form pretty quickly introduces silent E's or controlled vowels. And as the form begins to go on to the students who might be at or above benchmark, we'll start introducing a variety of consonant combinations. By second grade and by third grade, we're going to see similar kinds of motions where things start with the easiest for the struggling readers, get a little bit more difficult, and then get more difficult for the at and above benchmark students. The newest measure, first introduced in DIBELS 8th edition, is a word reading fluency measure, or let's call it wheel word fluency. So this measure starts at the beginning of kindergarten and goes through third grade. It also is able to be done for progress monitoring, and it's an assessment of whether or not students are able to read words with automaticity out of context. We know, research has shown, that some students are able to blend the nonsense words, but then they don't have automaticity with the sight words. Other students are able to read connected text with ORF, but they're figuring out the words from context and have more trouble when it's out of context. So in order to increase the rate at which we can capture reading difficulties, DIBELS 8 has this measure. Students read as many words as they can correctly for 60 seconds. The words on the form are a combination of irregular sight words as well as the kinds of decodable words that a child should be able to read absolutely with automaticity at a particular grade level. The words are introduced based upon when they enter a child's vocabulary as well as the written text that they're exposed to at a particular grade and time of year. Oral reading fluency is one of the areas where DIBELS 8th innovates significantly over prior versions of DIBELS. Only one passage is required. From grades 1 to grade 3, as well as progress monitoring, the child reads as much as they can of a single passage for 1 minute, as the teacher marks words that are incorrect or are self-corrected. Research over the course of years showed that the prior approach, which was tended to be 3 texts, actually didn't yield any better information than a single text. Regardless of how those 3 texts were utilized in order to create benchmark scores, averages, best of, worst of, it always came out the same, that a single passage is able to capture the information that's necessary to determine if a child is on track for reading or if they're struggling with reading difficulties. The second change that we have in this is that all the passages were written by writers, vetted by teachers and by parents, both for interestingness and appropriateness for all students. The oral reading fluency in DIBELS 8th edition no longer contains a retell. Teachers always raised issues about whether or not they were able to score that with fidelity. And again, the research was not showing that it was adding much relative to the amount of time that it was taking. So oral reading fluency is now the reading of a single passage, and we'll see in a moment that comprehension is done by maze. In second grade and above, students take the maze measure of basic reading comprehension. If you know prior versions of DIBELS, that used to be called DAYS. It's the same basic idea. It's a closed passage, meaning the child reads a text, every 7th word has been removed, and it has the correct word as well as 2 distractors. The distractors have been improved in that they now all have all the same part of speech, so that children can't just figure it out by grammar. They really need to understand the sentence in the paragraph in order to be able to get this right. Unlike all of the other measures, which are always done in one-on-one, maze is group administered. All children can be working on a computer at the same time in order to do the passage, and you administer it to the whole class. For schools that may not have sufficient devices for children or may not have a computer lab, this can be administered on paper and pencil during class time, and then teachers score it by hand. It's the only one where you could score by hand and then enter it into the system. So we've covered all of the DIBELS measures. What about RAN, which is so essential for identifying students who have reading difficulties, including difficulties consistent with risk of dyslexia? Amplify has added a well-researched RAN, rapid naming skills measure. It's required in grades K and 1, but to tell you the truth, it's also available to you should you ever need it in grades 2 and 3 if you're screening for dyslexia. The task is that teachers and students sit together side by side with the device, and the child names 50 numbers as quickly as they can. RAN measures exist out there in the field that are able to be letters, numbers, colors, or even objects. When we did our research, we found that letters and numbers were most consistent with measuring reading difficulties, including the risk of dyslexia. And we selected numbers because of the fact that it's more likely that the children know the numbers at the times that these are being assessed. So let's pull this all together again. This is the chart that we saw before, and what we could see is that you administer all the DIBELS measures in order to get an overall composite score or measure of reading risk. But when it comes to the specific requirements for submeasures, we could see that each one that's on the list has a corresponding measure in DIBELS, or in the case of RAN, corresponds to mCLASS RAN. So with this, mCLASS is able to cover all of the requirements for dyslexia and literacy screening in Arizona. Let's discuss assessment administration. mCLASS is administered one-on-one with the teacher and the student. The teacher has a device, preferably a touchscreen like an iPad or a Chromebook with a touchscreen, although some customers do use laptops and a mouse. The requirements are listed below. The student is going to be reading from printed materials. These could be downloaded for free from the University of Oregon, or if you prefer printed and bound copies, we do make those available for purchase. Now you might be wondering about Wi-Fi requirements. The devices are meant to be portable, so you may find yourself in a building or in a room in the building that does not have Wi-Fi at the time of assessment. That's no problem. mCLASS is going to capture the scoring on the device and then sync with our system as soon as you return to Wi-Fi. To deliver the assessment, a teacher and a student sit side by side, one-on-one, as we could see here in the picture. The teacher will have the device, and the student, in this case, might be doing phonemic segmentation without reading, or would have a text in front of her. The scoring is done by documenting with your finger what's happening on the iPad, and the scoring is instant and automatically. This works in person, but also we do, for this special time, we've found that it works just fine over a video hookup, and we provide full instructions on our website. The only exception to the idea of one-on-one scoring is the Maze measure of basic comprehension. This is whole group administered. Typically, the whole class works in a computer lab or on their own devices, and they work out the passage. It's scored automatically and uploaded into the system without teacher intervention. If you don't have devices for the students, the materials can be printed on site. Students can do it, paper, pencil, teachers score it, and then, and only then, that's the only case where they would actually type a number into the system. The result is that there's really no muss, no fuss, very little errors in the whole system as a whole, no extra time taken scoring or typing anything into a data system. Let's take a very quick look at what this would look like. So on the left, we could see that the teacher has sat down with her device and has a student in front of her. As soon as she taps on the student's name, it reveals past scores, as well as a blue box that shows which is the submeasure to administer next. When she begins the submeasure, everything that she needs is in the device. So all the instructions that she'll give the child, Mr. Say tells her exactly the words to say so assessment is done with fidelity. As the measure begins, it's a 1-minute measure. On the top of her screen she'll have a counter going up. It'll flash yellow 5 seconds before the end, so no need to keep an eye. And below it is a 3-second hesitation timer. Struggling students might need to be told to go on to the next word. We're looking at a screen from Nonsense Word Fluency. So right below that is the word rab that the child is looking at. Below it are the correct sounds. The teacher is going to tap right below exactly to document how the child is reading, in this case, and then actually made a mistake on the a and then the b. If she blended it into rab, she just draw a line across however the blending was done, exactly how the reading is done. Mistakes, tap on the sound, double tap for self-correct. If a child reads the whole word correct and is moving quickly, you just have a whole word button there to keep going on. At the end of the minute, the teacher will have a chance to accept the probe, and then the scoring is done instantaneously on the tablet itself and displayed for the teacher. When all of the sub-measures are completed, the composite score comes in. One of the nice things you'll see here on the screen is that the scores will be shown for the beginning of the year, fall, the winter, and the spring, side by side. So the teacher might be sitting with Emma and be able to have a conference on the spot about how she's doing and how she's been growing over the course of the year. The assessment itself is pretty quick. Each of the classic DIBELS measures is 1 minute in length, plus a little bit of time for instructions. RAN can take a little bit longer depending on the pace at which the child is reading the numbers. Maze is offered the whole class at one time, so it takes 4 minutes, but everybody's together. Now, when you're looking at this chart, you may be wondering about the minimum per grade, the maximum per grade. That's because of DIBELS' abilities to discontinue an assessment and for students who may not be appropriate. So for example, if a child has 0 in kindergarten on phonemic segmentation, the research shows that they probably don't need to do WRF, word reading fluency. Now, if the teacher wants to override that and do all the measures, or especially where the requirements are in place, they'll definitely want to do those measures. But there is a little bit of a range. As the students get a little bit older, the gating measure may actually be, for example, oral reading fluency. If a child is able to read well above benchmark on oral reading fluency, there may not be a need for them to do more fundamental skills like the nonsense word fluency or the word reading fluency. So the time is saved there for students, and that's why you have a minimum per grade or a maximum per grade. Testing windows are very simple. You set them yourselves. So your fall, winter, and spring windows will be set by you as a district, of course, doing it in line with the requirements of Move On with Reading. And you use this benchmark to do all the grade level measures at once. Now, we haven't spoken much about it, but one of the ways that mCLASS absolutely stands out is in its progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is done mainly for the students who are below and well below benchmark. You set the policy about how often it's done, typically aligned with the University of Oregon's recommendations of every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the student's reading levels. And it's only 1 or 2 measures. mCLASS will recommend which measure to do, but also give you the chance to override it and do others. As a result of that, a progress monitoring typically takes just a minute or 2 per child. Let's turn to reports. When a teacher completes her assessments, the first thing she's going to do is come to our reporting platform, which we call mCLASS Home. Upon arriving there, the first report that you'll automatically see is a benchmark class summary of the most recent time of year that she's done. So we're taking a look at a beginning of year or fall summary, and we could see that it maps out for the whole class who's been assessed, who's still in progress. We have 4 more, 5 students still at work. The percentages of students' overall risk, the DIBELS 8 composite scores, as well as how the class maps out against all the foundational literacy skills. So this gives you a snapshot of the class. Let's take a quick moment to talk about the key indicator of literacy risk, the composite score. So as we saw above, mCLASS scores everything automatically. As soon as each measure is completed, that all rolls up to the student's composite score. Each student is assigned one of 4 levels. So the lowest level, the well below benchmark level, these are the students who are in need of some intensive support. We're taking a look at this time of year and predicting risk relative to being at the end of the year meeting grade level expectations. So at the beginning of year kindergarten, we're asking, is this student likely to be on track at the end of kindergarten? If there's only a 20% chance that they're going to be on track based upon predictive statistical analysis, they'll be in the red or well below category. Above them, we have the students who are in need of strategic support outside the core. The green category are the students who are at benchmark, meaning they have an 80% chance or higher to be reading at grade level by the end of the year. And here we could see that we have 20% of the students or 2 students who are at benchmark, and they need support, but within the core program. And then finally, the 4th category are those students who are at minimal risk, 90% chance that they'll end the year at level. And these are students who could use support in the core, but probably also could use enrichment. By scrolling down the screen, teachers get all the details for their entire class. In this report, very easy to read using colors, numbers, and words, a teacher can look at the overall performance for students, say Emma Ashley, and see that she's running below benchmark and can use assistance. By reading across the columns, she can get her score relative to the goal for each measure, but more importantly, we want to keep the focus on the foundational skills. So as we could see, Emma could use some work on her letter names, but really much more importantly, we probably should be working on some of the other skills that really contribute to reading success over the course of time. Each of these columns could be sorted. So if we clicked on composite, this would be sorted by red, yellow, green, and blue, and we can immediately find which students need assistance. By sorting on a skill column, say the decoding column, we'd be able to identify all of the students who need help with decoding and what did they do on their precursor skills. This same report is used to help us know which students are having difficulties that are consistent with characteristics of dyslexia. Here we have one child, John Bell, who came up red or well below benchmark on his DIBELS ACE score, and then in his RAN or phonological processing score, he was also red. So there's a very discrete indicator, the little exclamation point in a circle, indicates that he's at risk for dyslexia. We purposely don't use words like dyslexia here because it's a screener of risk. We're not identifying this child with anything other than the need to look further. Of course, in your district, all students at kindergarten and 1st grade will have been assessed with RAN. From each box on the class list, we can drill down further into how the student did and actually see the transcript of the submeasure as it was administered. So we could do item level analysis on our own if we want to. This also means that there's absolutely no paper record keeping anywhere. Let's say you're looking at your class now and you're coming into an IEP meeting or a data team meeting or a parent conference. Or let's say you look at the historical data for a student and you want to see specifics of how their letter sounds or decoding were last year. You would always be able to drill down to the box and get an exact transcript. As we can see here on the right, we're looking at the item level for phonemic segmentation fluency, and we can see the blue lines indicating where a child has either segmented a word like the, or where on a word like year, they simply repeated the word year and did not segment it at all. In this report, we could see the full benchmark history of a child. So let's say you're a 2nd grade teacher and you want to see how they did in 1st grade. You would immediately pull up this report by clicking Emma Ashley's name on the prior reports, and you would see all of her mCLASS data for as long as she's been in the system. Now, this report, the data always follows the child. So if Emma had transferred to a new school in the district, The teacher who currently teaches the child will still be able to see all of her scores going backwards. As we could see, we have her overall risk score and can look at growth from time of year to time of year over the years, as well as if we wanted to look at the individual measures and then click and drill down to the item levels that we just saw. Of course, if we scrolled further down, we would see her RAND scores throughout. These two reports are based upon the sub-measure scores as well as the item error analysis for each probe. The report on the left is the student skills report. Here we see that each of the submeasures has been analyzed in order to be able to report out on Emma Ashley's very specific reading patterns. We could see, for example, that it's taken a look at her oral reading fluency and noticed which kind of difficulties she's having trouble with. Up on the top, a summary is offered of what is the instruction that Emma most needs next. On the right, every student in the class has been placed into a specific group. This report breaks out the class group by group, shows us which students are in each, what they need to work on instructionally, and if we were to open up the drop-down box, we would see that there are actually activities given for each group. Progress monitoring, of course, is really crucial for the ultimate achievement of any child. We've already seen that progress monitoring can be done very rapidly for children in need, typically 1 to 2 minutes, and on specific measures that mCLASS will recommend. When you come to the progress monitoring reports, we have a number of different options. The first thing that we see on the left is being able to look at all the progress monitoring that's taken place for a class in a summary view, what the measures are, the most recent scores, what the target is for the next time of year, and a little mini aim line that gives you a sense of the trajectory of the child. By drilling down into each student's measure, we get a progress monitoring graph. So on the right-hand side, we can see an aim line around decoding, where the student was at the beginning of the year in the fall, where they're expected to be in the winter. And as we could see, this particular student has 3 dots that are above that trajectory, and so therefore is very likely to succeed during the winter administration. mCLASS includes a goal-setting tool called Zones of Growth. In Zones of Growth, you will see a report for every child based upon where they are at the beginning of the year, at the fall, and where they need to get to, and what is the rate of growth compared to a national sample that would be needed in order to attain that. And then teachers can select very realistic and achievable goals for each child. And at the end of the period, say from fall to the winter administration, find out what those outcomes were. Of course, every teacher and school wants to keep parents well connected and informed. mCLASS includes letters that can go home to parents, or it could be used in guardians, or it could be used during conferences. These are for fall, winter, and spring. Each letter is in parent-friendly language explaining the assessment, the results, why it matters, and has activities that you could do with your child in order to be able to help them in their reading. These letters are available in both English and in Spanish 3 times a year. Parents will also have their own portal of activities that they could do at home to support their children. These activities also are in English and in Spanish. For coaches and for school leaders, as well as district leaders, we have a full reporting and analytics suite that does everything that you need to know to be able to take a look at both the proficiency that's happening across your school or district, as well as being able to measure growth and evaluate the success of the curriculum and the interventions that you're using. Without going report by report, you could see here the major templates that we have. There are the fidelity reports that help you know whether or not the assessment has been taking place in the appropriate benchmarks, fall, winter, and spring. Are there any schools, classes, or teachers that really need more support to move ahead? If you're using progress monitoring, you get to set the schedule and then run a progress monitoring fidelity report where you could see the pace at which progress monitoring is rolling out across your school and your district. For proficiency and for growth measures, there's a suite of 3 reports in which you can change a ton of parameters in order to look at the student's achievement in the current time of year, past times of year, historical. We'll see an example of one of these in a moment, but I would like to point out at the bottom, access raw data. You can download all of the data that we have in the system into Excel spreadsheet formats, CSV formats, so you can upload them into any other platform in use in your district. Each of the leadership reports that we have is highly configurable. So here we're taking a look at beginning, middle, and end of year results in red, green, yellow, blue. Of course, we'd be able to drill down from the grade to the school, all the way down to the teacher, and even get a list of students. But we also can change the parameters of this report. We could look year over year across grades. We could put the composite score, or we could look at individual measures so that we could see how are we doing on nonsense word fluency. Each of these reports, once you've identified what you want on your screen, you can download it to a CSV file, upload it and analyze it elsewhere. You can do a PDF to print, to email, or you can share the report and somebody else will get a link. They log into the system, say another principal in the district, they log into the system and it runs the report for them, and then they can change the parameters to make all of their own discoveries. Every one of these reports can be filtered by an enormous amount of demographic data. So if you want to analyze the achievement gaps, if you want to see how your students who have been identified with disabilities are doing, if you want to be able to take a look at it via the dyslexia risk flag, you're able to run an enormous amount of filters, and in each of these cases, download everything. So for example, let's say we took a report that put on it all of the different required screening measures that we saw above, and then we proceeded to filter it by the students who have the risk indicator lit. That would then give us a report of all the students who have been screened and in fact are at risk for reading difficulties, including dyslexia, with the records of what they've done on every one of the measures. We could then download that and use that into a format for any other reporting needs that we have. Last but not least, let's turn to training. When you think about the training of your teachers, think about 2 different things. One is that they need to become familiar with the assessment itself and the scoring rules, as well as, of course, how to read and use the data, along with understanding how these screening measures really correspond to the basic early literacy skills that they're trying to teach. The second thing, of course, that they need training to think about is how to use the platform itself. When they're assessing, it's really very simple and very straightforward, but they are going to want to practice. So the first option you have are free training videos that are embedded in the mCLASS Home platform itself. These could be useful for any of your teachers or yourself. They're especially useful if you've been using prior versions of DIBELS, especially if that might be on paper and pencil. If that's the case, they may want to learn the technology, the new scoring rules, and the new measures, and these videos will really help a lot. Odds are that you might be looking for more in-depth training, really covering all, not just the what, but also the why of everything that happens in mCLASS, and provides ample opportunities to practice scoring each measure in groups, individually, and the like. For this, we offer 3 options for training for purchase. The first, of course, is in-person facilitated training. It takes about a day. If you already use a prior version of DIBELS, you could do this actually in half a day. It could be done in an in-person format, or it could be a live facilitated webinar. We've been doing this for a very long time, not just now when everybody is remote. So our facilitators are all highly skilled at making sure that those days are interactive and include a lot of discussion and a lot of practice. A very simple, low-cost approach, especially if your teachers are used to online learning, is we offer an asynchronous, self-paced online course. This one really goes beyond those videos. It goes deeper into all the high and what, all the same content that we would do with our facilitated training, as well as a lot of practice for each of your teachers. Well, now let's turn to next steps. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that I've really interested you in learning more about mCLASS and maybe even our other products that might go along with us. Stop by our website, amplify.com, but really I might recommend email or call Tommy Gearhart, our Arizona representative, and get a demo or a discussion for yourself and for the stakeholders in your district. If you just want to keep it simple, I might recommend emailing Tommy and just ask him for our PDF reporting guide and for a dyslexia toolkit. These are two wonderful assets that will give you more depth into a lot of the things that we've discussed today, especially the reports that will really drive your students forward. Once again, thank you so much for joining me.